Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach. How are we, guys? Today, going to take a bit of a look at the defenders. So, I mentioned on my last video, I'm on camp next week. So, things are going to be pretty tight getting a bit of this content out. So, the long weekend's probably coming at a good time. Allows me to schedule a few videos. But, Shorty's got a barbecue on today. Then we've got a bloody brunch tomorrow. And want to watch the footy tomorrow. So, we're going live on Monday as well, so if you want to tune in, we're going live on Monday, but we'll find time to get these videos out. Now, the idea behind these, if you're new to them, every defender, rookies aside, we won't do rookies because we talk about them a bit. If a player's in 3% of sides or more, I'll talk about them. You know, whether it's 1 minute, 3 minutes, you know, we try and give just our 2 cents worth on it because I know sometimes it's frustrating when you've got like a bit of a pod guy and you're like, geez, I'd just love to know someone else's opinion, and you just can't find someone's opinion. So I feel like this is a good way in one video to just timestamp every relevant player and discuss it all at once. And we'll do that for each line. So yeah, thanks for your support over the last few weeks. Really had a few new subscribers jump on board, not only on YouTube but on TikTok. So thanks for that. But still struggling away with the audio too, mate. Look, I'm going to put it out to you guys. I've had a bit of feedback on the audio, and I'm at a loss. I've tried a few things, whether it's with this, the settings, the angles, the ports. Look, basically, if anyone out there has a bit of an opinion on how to help me, we record through this, just the voice recorder on my laptop. Maybe that's not the best because, as you can see, it's not, or you can barely see, but maybe it's not picking it up great. But I actually thought I had it somewhat fixed because I just put stuff together on Movie Maker. This is my last video. And the levels looked all right. Like, occasionally, you know, it'll drop away, but I've had times where it's been way less than this, and I'm like, yeah, definitely an issue. But I actually thought this video came through all right, but still had a comment or two saying, mate, the audio's no good. So I apologise if you've got to turn the volume up and then an ad just blasts your ear bones off. I don't think, I think the word is eardrum that I'm looking for. But yeah, would appreciate your support around that one as well. But yeah, look, we'll jump into it because these videos can be a bit long. But yeah, I will timestamp it. That'll be in the description because I think by the time I post it, I might be on camp, depending on when I launch this one. So yeah, we might not be able to link it into the comments. So suss the description for a guy that you're looking for. But first things first, Sam Flanders. He's in 9% of teams, and he's got absolutely no right to be. I don't know if there's 9% of people out there who have missed the injury update, but yeah, he wouldn't have played this week if the game wasn't cancelled. And last I saw on 360 during the week was he was a 1 to 2 weeker. So whether he even plays their first round is irrelevant. At that price, he is just a prime candidate to hopefully start slow or have a bit of a sluggish start to the season due to a pretty poor preseason, bit of a back concern. So he will be a guy that I'm sure is in our sides at some point because he's a pretty good fantasy scorer, whether he's, wherever he is on the ground, he finds a way, but not to start with. Definitely better options. Harry Sheezel, clearly 67% of teams, he is going to be one of our favourites, and it just sort of reminds me of those days where Nick Dacos or Gary Ablett Jr. back in the day, where you can pick these guys outside the midfield. You know, you might only get one crack at it where you know they're going to be a jet and they still get that dual position status. I know Harry's only a defender, but he'll eventually get dual position. And I reckon for the rest of his career, we'll probably be only able to pick him as a mid. So he is quite clearly my number one pick for the top spot in our backlines. Average of 118 last year. Some people talk about, he won't be half back. You know, that's where he scored. Well, mate, 118 average overall. He scored bloody well wherever he was. You know, even when he did work to a half-forward flank, push up the ground. He's so classy, such a nice ball user. He just finds a way. So don't need to spend too much time on him, I feel. He's a lock, in my opinion. Luke Ryan, probably one that I'm not as keen on. And I want to have a look at these stats. I feel like we're paying top dollar for him. So 116 just feels absolutely overs for me. So last year we saw him have a ridiculous start. Now, more often than not, he's been around your high 90s or even that 107. Like his career, 95, 107, 99, 96, 109. Then last year was the outlier. And I feel that was a bit in regards to the way Fremantle played early in the season. Very chip around, switch the ball. I remember at gather round, like he was just on every switch. They love switching the ball. And then I don't know if you recall those comments Longmuir made probably halfway through the year. It was like, we don't care about the stat sheet. You know, we've probably stuffed around with it too much. We need to start playing more direct. So clearly there was a bit of a change in game style, and that was reflected in his scoring. So some huge scores to start the year, as we know, into round 12. And then post-bye, it really changed for him. You know, he had the 156, 36 touches there, you know, against my Cats. 34 kicks. What the hell? That's ridiculous. Didn't realise that. Still a really good averager. You know, he doesn't put in too many poor games at all, but the big scores and probably those big marks went away. Okay, he dined out on the Cats, but look at all these double-figure marks in the first half of the season. And then if you really look into the second half, most of them is around 6, 7, or 8. So whether that was teams putting a bit of work into him or that change in game style, it did seem like the Dockers changed up their style. So I'm happy to pass. Like a guy that I feel like someone did the numbers, I think first, and you can do the numbers right there if you want, but I think first 12 rounds was something like I think it was like a 125 average or something. And then the last 10 or whatever it was after the bye, 102. So he's still going to be a keeper, a premium option, but I just reckon we could get him at a cheaper price. Lachie Whitfield, 13% of teams. He's probably someone that I could definitely wear playing. I mean, I think with the bye, maybe prefer other options, but I've got a few defenders with the bye, as was well noted the other day. He's probably had a bit of a resurgence, and it's probably a good reminder that we shouldn't blacklist guys just because they've burned us a couple of times. Sometimes they can bounce back, because he was the golden boy off the back line for many years. He served us well at times, and then when he sort of had those moves up to the wing and would get injured, you know, this 99, 111, 104, we loved him back then, and then he just sort of hurt us for 3 years, but then he was back last year, clearly playing that halfback role, the main distributor out of there. So yeah, look, there's no reason to not pick him. I mean, I think, again, if I had to say why I haven't picked him, it's a bit like Luke Ryan. I think when you add in the buy, plus I reckon we're paying top dollar. Like, I don't see him going 110 this year, but I definitely see him being around 105 to 110, you know, probably somewhere in the middle there. But I don't feel the need to start him. Is a guy that can get shut down if people do sort of go defensive on him, but clearly that didn't happen too much last year because he went nuts. But yeah, happy to not start and go for others with the anticipation of just seeing how he goes, maybe bringing him in at a cheaper price, which I think is pretty likely. Dayne Zorko is probably one that's really boosted his ownership over the last week since we got the news that Brisbane no longer have that bye. We're all anticipating that Geelong and Brisbane just play in round 3. I don't think that's been confirmed. It may have been by the time I post this, but not for me. And the main reason is the bloke's 36, so he could just fall away naturally at some stage. And the main reason would be Kitty Coleman's going to be back, whether it's round 3, round 4, round 5, you know, somewhere around there. And I don't really like picking a premium that could have his role really altered depending how they approach the situation. Like, it might not change it. You know, Coleman might come in and, you know, we've seen 2 halfback flankers work really well. And they might just be like, nah, Zorko's on fire. Like, Coleman's going to have to work around Zorko to play. But I do feel as if Coleman will have some sort of an impact. And I don't really want to be waiting around and being like, oh, geez, averaging 115 for the first month, but Coleman's coming back next week. How does that change it? I don't know. So, yeah, happy to pass on Zorko due to the age. And just, I think he is so flexible, and I think with Coleman coming back, how does it work? How does it change it? Bit of an unknown. Happy to pass. McGovern only in 2% of sides. Sinclair, 7%. And he's probably a pass for me just because of the interrupted preseason. He didn't play the latest practice game. Pretty sure it was a hamstring injury. But yeah, nonetheless, he's really had a February that he would have not enjoyed, being off the park for much of it and just working his way back to full fitness. So again, my general philosophy with premiums is let's pick him off a big preseason, because Sinclair could start the year and average 115. Like, he could do that, but over the journey, we've seen normally a correlation between slow starts equals poor pre-season. And on the other side of things, all Australian years often equal, they didn't miss a beat through the pre-season. So, again, he's probably one that I really, really like. He's one of my favourites, but one that I reckon we're a good chance to pick up cheaper or at another stage of the season when he really gets going. Dan Houston, one of my guys that I was really big on a month ago. I probably thought he'd get a bit more of the footy. I know he did score well in the practice game, but I don't know. I was kind of thinking it'd be more. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but I think Josh Dacos probably impacted him a bit. Look, I'm not going to talk you out of it. I mean, he's a gun. He's a beautiful ball user. Didn't take as many kick-ins as I kind of thought. But he'll be a really good option. I guess I've changed my tune. I was sort of thinking he could really bump things up to 115, but I haven't seen that. I haven't seen enough to suggest that in a couple of prackies that I've seen. So I kind of feel like he's probably going to stay about the same range. Therefore, I don't feel like I need to start him. Of course, we're not going to get a look at him over the weekend because of the suspension. So we really are flying a little bit blind. New club, wouldn't mind just seeing how he slots in. So probably one that I'm not going to say, geez, you can't start him, but one that I've just opted to go elsewhere on. And Nic Martin, geez, he's a class act. He's sort of like that Harry Sheezel mould. We've sort of talked about a few halfback flankers over the last few players, but Nic Martin is a guy that plays that half-forward flank role, is a real key user for the Dons. They like to get the ball in his hands, and he's creative. He pushes up the ground and just finds the ball. Like, I think last year I started him, did fantastic off halfback, but they obviously felt, you know what, we could probably get a bit more impact from Nic higher up the ground, use his creativity and dash and ability to find space. And he did. He continued to score really well and still averaged that 105 across the whole year. So he's a nice ball user and he's just smart. Like, he hits the scoreboard too. Probably not one of my top picks. I've probably preferred a few others. If you've watched a few of my videos and team updates, you know how much I like someone like Max Holmes in there as well. So not one that I'm starting with, but certainly a bit of a favourite of mine. And he's clearly, got a few people interested in 7% of teams. Jordan Clark, 8% of sides. And I think he just does what he does. He just really finds plenty of the footy. And he was what we really searched for a lot. Like, you're sort of looking at someone like Matt Roberts or Perryman this year. We're hoping to get that Jordan Clark effect, that average of 82. They've been on the cusp, boom, averages 104. That's what we're hoping to get out of, particularly someone like Roberts, who started really well last night. He was just super consistent. Really, I don't know if he went under 80. He had that 63 against the Swans, probably got some James Jordan attention. Then he had a bit of a quieter one against the Giants. But more or less, he was just super consistent and just, high marks, chip around. I think he's a pretty reliable option. I'm not going to... Personally, he's not in my team, but I could see why he'd be in yours. I don't have any real queries over him. I think he's pretty solid. So, don't mind him at all. And now we probably start to get to that next range of player where we feel like we're getting a little bit of smidgen of value plus premium numbers. There's a few guys that people are keen on him. Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera is definitely one. And I really like him. He's a smooth mover. One of my favourites. Long-time watchers of the channel will know that I started him a couple of years ago. We didn't quite get the reward we were hoping for. We were maybe a year early on the breakout. But, smooth mover. Great user of the footy. Saints love the ball in his hand. So, would have been great. A bit like Joel Freijah, who we'll talk about in a minute. Would have been great to see Freijah and Dale in the same practice match, just to see how it balanced out and who was the guy and how often they could combine. It'd be great to see Wanganeen-Milera alongside Sinclair. Would have been good to get a feel whether Sinclair was in the mid, half back, what were the mixes and percentages around that. But I think they will actively try and get the ball into Wanganeen-Milera's hands. I think we'll see a lot of handball receives, run and carry, kick-outs from full-back, and then get the handball back. I think we'll see a lot of it. Probably the sort of guy that I think's every chance to get some attention and maybe struggle with it at times. But I wouldn't say that's enough to turn us off him. Like, these days, teams don't tag stacks. We saw, someone like Jordan Clark, we just looked at his stats. It looked like he may have, he's racking up the footy, and maybe he copped attention twice in the year, or at least attention that stopped him. So I think Wanganeen-Milera is a guy that we could definitely start with confidence. And then we've got Max Holmes, who's in 26% of sides, and I am one of that 26%. I love him. I think he is Geelong's number one midfielder. Cats don't have the bye anymore, so I think that's why we've seen a little mini jump in his ownership. I think he was about 21% maybe a week or so ago. And now he's really just getting a few more on board now that the bye's not as much of an issue. And some people will say, the body, those hamstrings. And yeah, look, I get that. I mean, look, it's a chance. I can't sit here and say he's going to have a injury-free year. But like we said before, normally good pre-seasons equal those seasons that players no longer have those niggles. And he's had a great pre-season. I wouldn't get too carried away with a bit of a quieter practice match. Geelong were giving opportunities to someone like Nevitt and other guys. He's clearly the main guy. There'll be no halfback from Holmesy. He's a mid. One of the best meters gained players that we have. Just gets the footy, runs and carries, and can kick at 60. And will genuinely, I think he'll start to hit the scoreboard a bit more too. So I've been big on him. And I think he's probably someone I feel can hit the 110. And he's been locked away into my side for some time. James Sicily is one that makes me a smidgen nervous. Look, we love what James Sicily can do at his best, and we've seen him deliver some huge numbers, 110 plus. And I think as a halfback flanker, that he can intercept and he can just be the absolute guy back there. But this year, and we even saw it on Friday night against the Swans, he got thrown forward and he actually played pretty well. I think he snared the sealer there on the left, mate. Yeah, that was the only goal he kicked and looked like a real presence. And that's probably a worry. He looked probably too good up forward because I think they'll start to use him there a bit more, which is not really what we want as a SuperCoach option. Last year, we saw a little bit of it from Sicily where they'd throw him forward, and I think it's kind of two-pronged. Like this year, they've now got Battle and Barras, which frees him up a lot more to go forward. Plus, there's still no Lewis, and Cal Shadir has gone down. So, unfortunately, it really is a recipe to see him play a fair bit forward, and I think that's going to... At times, he'll go forward and kick a goal like he did, and that'll help him get to 92, but I think over the journey, it'll be more damaging to his scoring than not. So, I think the only reason I would have picked him if he was clearly going to be the man off half-back. So, going to pass on him. But yeah, 9% of you are backing Sis in there. Tom Stewart is an interesting one as well. Probably a little bit unders, and we all know the story. Last year they finally started to tag him. I don't know how many years it took for them to be like, geez, he's pretty crucial to Geelong's victories here. Maybe we chuck someone on him, and he didn't have a clue what to do. He was very quiet, and in the end, Geelong worked out how to counter it. They just threw him in the midfield, and he could still float back and sort of lose the matchup. But definitely started the year relatively strong, was probably best on ground at halftime against Brisbane, had 62 before going off injured. But then, yeah, just a really quiet 6 or so months with a few 70s in there. And, wasn't until this back end of the year and probably the 5 weeks there where he really got going and actually started to understand how he could counter it. But you're getting him definitely at unders because he had 2 sub-affected games against the Eagles and Brisbane. So he's definitely under what he should be. Even if he did struggle with the tag a little bit, I still feel like he's going to average 105. If we take into account those sub-affected games, that average would have been about 100. And he would have learnt. They learned how to counter that tag. We've seen him go in the centre bounce a little bit already in the practice matches, probably just to allow him to be a bit of a tougher guy to stop. So, yeah. Look, I think he's a good pick. Probably one that I have had in and out of my side. Not going to start. Wouldn't rule him out of being a really good selection. I think he's definitely underpriced. But, yeah, just one that I've been like, thanks, Tommy, but I'm probably just going to wait, see how he goes. Then we rolled to Dan Rioli. 3% of teams just makes the cut there. Not for me. I just feel like maybe some people are thinking bit of a bump in score at the new club and a bit more responsibility, but they've still got someone like Will Powell and John Noble and a few guys back there. I don't think it's like he's just going to have an absolute monopoly on all the ball down back for the Suns. And he, for me, has just been a guy that is pretty consistent, but an early 90s to mid 90s guy. And I think at that price, we're not picking him to average 94. Like, if you've got him, you're expecting him to really push those numbers into the high 90s. But I think we've probably seen his cards, like 92, 86, 92. I don't really see any need or reason as to why he'd absolutely jump. Some people may be thinking the changing club is why. But, yeah, happy to pass on Rioli. And this is the point where we probably start to scroll down and get more into that mid-price range. And Colby McKercher, one of my boys. And there are going to be years where I talk about him in the preseason and be like, mate, he is a must-have. But until he gets that midfield role or clear half-back role, it's not for me. He's playing a bit of a wing outlet player. It's a weird role. Like, he'll sort of start... I think what they're trying to get is a bit of that Nic Martin role. Starts on a half-forward flank, pushes high up, has a license to be the release player and very much a ball user. But it's just been... Watching him closely in the preseason, it's just made me a little nervous. I think there's times where that role just lends itself to going missing a little bit, whether that's when you're a half-forward flank / wing, the ball gets stuck on the other side, or it's stoppage after stoppage, and you're the outlet guy. Or if you're starting at half-forward and you're just getting beaten a fair bit, which the Roos may encounter at times, and you're just not getting that release. I think he's a player that he'll need his midfield to be on top to get those clearances and hand it out to him, and then use his pace and fantastic left foot. But that's just not enough for me, because unfortunately he's at a price where we need him to go nuts. I mean, at that price, you need him to bump that average up by minimum 7. I mean, we need 95, but yeah, even so, you're probably picking him as like, gee, he needs to be a keeper. So one would sort of say, is 95 even going to keep it? I mean, you'd take it, but you probably want a 98, 99, because as we'll see, the top... What was the top 8? If you look at that, top 12 defenders, 101. So, even if he averages 99, he'd be put about 14th if all things were relatively similar last year. So I think defenders are more than capable of going 105 plus. So I think at that price, unfortunately, because he's one of my boys, we're going to need a bit more from Colby, and I'm not sold on it. Who else have we got? Trent Rivers. Interesting one, and we'll talk about Short, Perryman and Roberts in a bit more detail soon. They're probably the ones I'm preferring. A little bit cheaper and a little bit more defined role. I think for Rivers, he's been a pretty impressive guy over the preseason. Like, I've really liked it, particularly that practice game against North. Thought he looked great. Had like 30-something touches, plenty of centre bounce time. But probably my concern would be we got a bit of a look at the pre-season game when Petrarca was back, and was Viney back as well? Let's have a bit of a look. And it definitely impacted him. So Viney was back, and look, I don't have the centre bounce numbers on me right now, but it did impact him. And it just... Oh, God, what have I done there? Far out. It was just the sort of game that said to me, okay, if you can deliver... when Langdon's in there, because even he's playing more inside mid. If you can deliver and prove to me that you can handle these midfield minutes with all the other boys in there, fantastic. But 17 touches and not a stack of clearances, maybe 3. So he had 3 clearances. But yeah, look, Oliver, Petrarca, Viney, Langdon all had more clearances than him, which speaks to me like a guy who's not going to get enough mid-time, particularly when Pickett comes back from his suspension. They like to chuck him in the centre bounce probably 50, 60% of the time. So I don't see him taking his game next level as a half-back flanker. I think there's enough or too many mouths to feed with Bowie and Salem and Rivers. And it's a bit like McKercher. You need him to really bump those numbers up like 10 or so points. And I'm happy to play elsewhere, because I just don't think until he elevates himself to a genuine mid, which I think he will at some stage, because we saw snippets of it last year when Oliver and Petrarca were out. But I think when those boys are in there, unfortunately, I just don't think he's going to get enough opportunity in the guts to score the points we'd need him to at that price. Starting to get towards those mid-price fellas that I talked about that I'm probably a bit more interested in. And Jayden Short is the first one, 22% of sides. If you caught my preview video the other day, you'll know that I'm keener on Roberts and Perryman for that matter. We'll get a bit of a look at Perryman on Sunday, and we got a good look at Roberts on Friday, and he looked great. I thought it was by no means like an amazing game by him, but he just found it. Like 26 times, scored 115 or something like that, maybe a touch more. So for me, I just feel as if he is a bit more reliable, Matty Roberts, and we'll talk about him more in a second. If we focus on Jayden Short, I just don't like how uncontested and a bit one-dimensional he is. Really doesn't tackle, and I've said this a bit, like he does not like to tackle at all, and I just get worried. The easy thing to do would be to go to his stats and be like, look, Dan Rioli leaves. That sort of affected him last year. He got pushed up the ground a little bit more at times. Rioli leaves. Why wouldn't he return to these 98s and the 96? Like, why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he, Shorty? That was, for the most part, a pretty impressive Richmond side, for the most part. And impressive teams intercept and win the ball back and feed it off to their ball users. Jayden Short. Just worries me that will he get enough ball? I think he'll definitely average like 90, give or take. And again, it's the same discussion. Can they move their numbers up enough? He's very uncontested. And like we saw, averaged just one tackle a game last year. And I know this would be similar to some halfback flankers. They don't all have to, But I think he's a guy that has to find heaps of the footy. 3.4 contested possessions. Like, this is a highly uncontested guy. And what worries me in the practice game most recently against the Pies, they were smashed. But in the first half, I think the scoring shots were about level. And from what I saw, a relatively competitive performance. The scoreboard wasn't exactly competitive, but better. Of the two halves, the first half was much better. Jayden Short has it 20 times. Now, in the second half, to me, it didn't look like he got any attention or anything like that, but that was when the Pies just couldn't miss a goal, and he piled it on, and they dominated. 5 touches in the second half for Jayden Short. Really went out of it. Just couldn't find anyone to feed him the footy, and Collingwood weren't missing, so he couldn't take a cheeky little kick out. So you could read it one of two ways. There's going to be a lot of ball down in that back line for Richmond, so a lot of kick outs. Some sides will be inaccurate. He'll get a bit of footy. I could see the selection working. Like, I'm not going to be like, whoa, that's a trap. You can't pick him. But for me, I'd prefer others for those reasons. And speaking of those others, it would be Matt Roberts. And we've already touched on him a little bit, but I like the role. I like that he seems to be the man to get the outlet kick. And Blakey does a bit as well. Like, it's not as if he's the sole guy. But Roberts just seems to have a happy knack of finding space. And we've got a little bit of an insight as to what he could be in the last 7 or so rounds. And this won't be new information to anyone because he scored 124. Nice. But he's a kicker, isn't he? 20 kicks last night. And look, we saw the finals weren't good. And I think that speaks to a fella who, again, is a bit more uncontested. So I'll wear that. Maybe he's similar to Jayden Short in that regard. But, this run here was really impressive, that back end of the year. I think the average was about 107 across the last 7 or 8 weeks. And, I just think the way our backlines are shaping up, it requires maybe 2 premiums, 2 mid-prices, maybe an extra. You don't want to field too many defensive rookies because we're not quite sure on them. We're not quite sure who's getting picked, let alone who could be a good scorer. So I think we want to protect our backline rookies, and we need some guys with a bit of value. So I reckon you do need 2, maybe 3 of Short, Roberts, Perryman, and Freijah. And I think Roberts, for me, would be the number 1 seed out of those guys. Like the way that he takes the kicks on. And I reckon Friday night conditions didn't absolutely suit him either. The rain came in. It was a bit dewy throughout the second half. But, I think there'll be days where he just rolls around, has 12 marks, and just hits left foot kicks through the middle all day long. So I do feel like a 3-figure average is possible. Not guaranteeing it, but I'm optimistic about it. Hence, I've got him at the number 1 seed out of those boys. So, yeah, I'm pretty confident with him, and he's starting in my side, and certainly gave me a bit of confidence watching him run around against the Hawks as well. And then we go to the next guy with a big ownership, and that's Harry Perryman. And we're pretty reactive in the SuperCoach game, and I think by the time I post this one, they're probably just finishing up, and a lot of us will either be like, "Whoa, Perryman's impressive," and that average or that ownership could go to 30 plus, or people will get worried and drop off. I mean, I'd be expecting, that type of game that sees him get 21 touches, 8 tackles, and scores 109 sort of deal. I don't think he's a fella that, we look at Roberts and that, we're like, yeah, he's going to wax around and sweep up and get close to 25, 30 most weeks. Perryman won't be that guy. He's different to these others. He's not a halfback flanker anymore. He's going to be that inside mid, we hope. I mean, we saw that in what we were told was a full dress rehearsal for the Pies, albeit against Richmond, but that's what we got told, that this was them genuinely showing their wares. De Goey's not in, but I still think he'll play a bit of a split between mid and forward. So I think Perryman is that defensive midfielder that they need to allow Dacos to just be carefree and take the game on. So probably going to learn more on Sunday, but I think we've seen enough. I think he'll play a nice high tackle, win enough of the footy, win clearances type of guy. And I do think at that price, he's one that I'm really excited to start. So currently in my side is Harry Perryman. And then we'll probably move on to, we probably might be down to Freijah perhaps. Josh Weddle in 3% of teams. But yeah, look, I think sometimes people just maybe get excited about him because he is quite an exciting, unique, highlight reel type player. But not a defined enough role for us to pick him in SuperCoach. And who have we got coming up next? It might be Freijah, will it? Yeah, it'll be Joel Freijah. And as I touched on earlier in the video, it would have been great to see Bailey Dale play alongside him. I was researching this morning. Bailey Dale looks like he should be... Well, looks like he's firming for round 1. Was back at training, doing a bit of scratch match stuff. We got a bit of an update somewhere around here. Fantastic. Where was it? I think I scrolled past it. Dale, yeah, made it through. VFL scratch match, quad issue, should be right. So he was fantastic in that practice game, wasn't he? 27 touches, high marks, nice use of the footy. I've had a couple of comments in the section sort of talk about he might be required to move up into the middle or onto a wing because of all their injuries. I hope not for those selecting him. But yeah, he's a guy that I quite like. I wouldn't rule him out. I think if he is off half back, I think there's a lot to like about him. I think he and Dale could roam around and get quite a bit of footy. We've seen 2 half-back flankers work pretty well at some clubs. He's clearly going to be the second fiddle to Dale, but that's not to say he can't average good numbers. My probably only query on him to some of the other guys is I think Perryman, Roberts and Short are all genuine chances to go 90 plus, some even higher. I'd be pretty surprised if Freijah averaged something that started with a 9. I think it's way more likely to be in the 80s, high 80s, like mid to high. If you said Shorty put an average on it, I'm probably going to throw an 86 or an 87 at you, which is a nice increase, 20 points on his average. But so probably a good pick for the price. The question might be, are there better picks 50, 60, 70, 80k further up that could give you more? So that is probably the balancing act and how you structure up your side. And maybe that 70k helps you out elsewhere. That's the beauty with the old salary cap. It is about balance across each line. But yeah, that's probably the way I am seeing Joel Freijah. Okay, we're starting to roll through that mid-price range now. Koning is a good one to speak about. 11% just shouldn't be. It just shouldn't be. I was definitely a bit mesmerised by the potential of him. I remember watching him, might have been... Well, it was definitely last year. Probably the practice matches, he hasn't been that impressive. But last year had a nice run where he was the number 1 ruck for the Cats and was pretty mobile. Consistently got like 20 touches, 15 to 20 hit-outs. But just watching him in the practice games, geez, he's not a physical presence at all in the ruck. So This was the run here when he started against his brother against Carlton. Tom destroyed him, but he still scored 130. I don't know how. And then, there was a 5-match sequence with a few poor games in there, no doubt, a 58 and a 64. But overall, that was an average of 95 in the 5 games there. So very small sample size, but of course we get excited when a guy is playing in the ruck and number 1 ruck, and Geelong need him to. But as a Cats fan, and I'm telling you, Holmes is a gun. I'm telling you, lock him in. But equally, as a Cats fan who watches the club real closely, De Koning very much feels like a trap to me. I think at any given moment, they could choose, depending on the matchup, they could choose to bring in Stanley for a bit of insurance. Because I know we played Cherry and Gawn in the first 4 or 5 weeks. He would likely need support. And even it could work the other way. Gee, he's got a good record on, I don't know, Kerno or Norton, whoever you want to call it. Probably need Sam at full back as more importance this week. I think it could just chop and change far too much. Plus, he wasn't even that impressive. It'd be different if he did dominate against the Bombers in the Pracky. That'd be different. We're like, oh, geez, maybe. But he actually didn't look that good. His hands overhead, he's low on confidence. I don't know why, but he does drop a lot more than he used to in his first year. So it's a straight up no for me. I really hope he does play well this year, but there's just way too much unknown in his position from week to week, which is very nervy, because you don't want to see him come out and score 92 and 103 in the first 2 weeks and be like, oh, it's a good selection, shorty. And then the next 3 weeks, it's like, oh, we need him at full back, and he just scores 60s. So, it's a no from me. Too much flexibility and variety in where he could play. Callum Mills still in 5% of sides. Get him out, guys. He is not going to play for a solid period of time, 3, 4, 5 weeks. Could be a nice sideways/downgrade in the early parts of the season, hopefully. Don't think I missed anyone there. Nope. We can really start scrolling now because they're probably the main mid-price guys. Isaac Quaynor, no need at all. Maybe just a bit of Pies love there for Quaynor. We're getting very much closer to the 200 range there. You've got Coleman still in 5%. Maybe a few people just picked that team in January and haven't looked at it since. Very much getting right down there. Milera, I actually did a bit of a collab with Cookson the other day, and he had Miller in the start, but I did have to talk him out of that one. He's the sort of fella that we see his name, we're like, oh, silky halfback flanker. If he gets fit, anything's possible. But the fact is, he's just never fit. He's never fit, and he didn't play a practice game. Sort of falls in that category of like, hey, I'm open to the risk, but you're going to have to convince me. And he hasn't even convinced us, so there's no need to take the punt. Not to mention that the Crows actually have a bit of options around their halfback flankers now. Laird's gone back there. I mean, Miller could even play on a wing. So don't even know if he's in the best 22, best 23. So it's a pass for me. And then, we're pretty much at that. Good one to finish on here. I reckon it'll be the finish. But Josh Sinn. Port Adelaide fans, I'm calling on you. What are we going to get from Sinn? Because this is one where, maybe I've tried to give you the advice for the video so far, but I am at a loss as to what this guy is going to offer us. High pick in years gone by, been ravaged by injury, halfback flank position opens up. They talk him up in the preseason that he's looking really good. It gets managed in both games. Like, I think there was a match sim that he didn't play, and then he plays this one and he is managed off, but actually pretty good numbers, like 40% time on ground, finds it 14 times, 67. And I watched this game, and he actually was taking a few kick-outs and, was just pretty clean. Like, would just find the footy and often just hit a nice little target or boot it forward. It wasn't like, best player on the ground at halftime or anything like that. But I think at that price, it's very, very interesting. So give me your thoughts on it, because I'm just not quite sure. I sort of want to have him at a D5. It's probably he, or probably another one who's a bit more unique is Cleary. I think Cleary actually played a nice intercepting game and could find that role. But again, we need to see what happens when Dale comes back. Travali is just, he's in 37% of sides, but he just seems to me like an absolute sub. Like, I think he's going to be the sub or get subbed off, and he's on that fringe. So I don't think there's any need for him to be so popular. But yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on Sinn. I feel like Sard would have been one we talked about. I feel like he gets talked in the comments a bit, but he's only in 2%, so maybe not. Same with Sard Al-Houli. I think he's in maybe just popped up then 20, 30% of sides. Yeah, not to be, because I don't reckon he's best 22 either. But yeah, that is a wrap-up on all the relevant defenders, or at least the blokes that are relevant by the ownership. Yeah, if you reckon I missed anyone and you'd really like to hear my thoughts on it, chuck them in the comments. I don't really know when I'll get round to the comments, if I'm being honest, because, like I said, I'm away on camp. But definitely Friday night, I'll be back. I'll be doing a bit of a team reveal, and I'll do my best to get the comments. But I guess the idea about this video is that hopefully I've covered off on just about anyone that you could possibly think of. So let me know your thoughts, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I'll be back soon with another video just like this for one of the other lines. Cheers.